The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples went home, and the crowd came together again so that they couldn't even eat. When his relatives heard this, they set out to take him by force because people were saying, "He has gone mad." A gospel inspired by God. How would you know if you were going mad? It's not as clear cut. It's not as clear cut. You know, people are declared mad for typically two reasons, it seems to me, when I read history. Either they live unconventional lives vis-a-vis the political system of the country in which they're living, or they're living unconventional lives, or they have unconventional thinking vis-a-vis the religion in which they grew up. And so you get the whole, Gulag archipelago in Russia, where tens of thousands of people, particularly the really bright people in the community, are sent away into psychiatric institutions because they're opposing the political regime, communism in that case. And so people who are living non-conventional lives or thinking in non-conventional ways are regarded by society, and particularly those in charge, as crazy, and they're put away to be reformed. The same thing happens in religion. When you think unconventionally in religion, the accusation very often is that you're gone mad. So it's interesting to watch how different societies determine who's crazy and who's sane. In Ireland, we have two different terms for it. We use two terms. One is called Gialt, and there's actually a place in County Kerry called Galilean, which means literally the valley of the madmen. And the theory was that somehow people who were really mad, they managed to congregate from all over Ireland in this valley in County Kerry. Now, I don't know if it's a put down to the Kerry people or not, I have no idea. But there's another phrase we use, and it is called Dinna Ladia, which literally translates as a person with God. So there's a different kind of madness in the Irish cosmology, and it is the madness of people who are in love with God. They're kind of simple people. So people who fall into this category would be like Down syndrome people. So they're not conventional. They're not able to think like the rest of us. But there's an innocence about them that obviously speaks about the divine. So the phrase is that they are people with God, that they're walking with God in their innocence or in their kind of simplicity. So there's two very different categories in Irish cosmology. There's a huge big book called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's about 2,000 pages, produced by the psychologists and the psychiatrists of the United States of America, determining a whole range of psychiatric conditions and mental disorders, and what the criteria are, and what the prognosis is, and what the demographics are, and what the etiology of particular illnesses. Literally 2,000 pages of this kind of stuff. So defining madness is very, very idiosyncratic. So this morning now we have this strange story, and it's skipped over in all the Gospels except Mark's Gospel. Mark devotes about 10 verses of one chapter, chapter 3, to this extraordinary story, and most of us had never heard of it. What happens is, Jesus, after 29 years as a very nice, quiet, Jewish boy, being a carpenter, being ordinary, suddenly decides that he's the Son of God, and starts going out, and he's doing all kinds of preaching and all kinds of miracles. And now he's on a tour, and just yesterday he picked out his 12 disciples, and now he comes home for a break, and his relatives are infuriated. This carpenter is making a fool of the family. He thinks he's a preacher. He thinks he's a rabbi. And so they set out to restrain him or to take him by force because they thought he'd flipped his lid. And so there's Jesus, in his village, acting in a particular way that makes him a madman. Somehow they fail to catch him. He's surrounded by too many of his disciples. So they report to his mother. They say, "Are you aware that your son has flipped his lid? Can you go and talk sense to him or get him out of circulation? He's destroying the family name." And so in 10 verses later from today's one, Mary and his brothers come to the house where he's living. And it's surrounded by a whole group of people, and they can't even get in. So they send a message in, and somebody says, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside, and they want to talk to you." And obviously, they're going to kind of drag him home and talk sense to him. And his response is, who is my mother? And who are my brothers and sisters? My mother and my brothers and sisters are those who hear the word of God and follow it. So he refuses to go out even to talk to them. Then the very next verse is that the Pharisees weigh in, and where his relatives think he's gone mad, the Pharisees think he's possessed not just by a demon, but by the prince of demons himself, a guy called Beelzebub. And so they're claiming he's not only mad, he's in the possession of Satan himself. And what are the hallmarks of this? It's not so much that he was healing people, but that he was preaching a totally different kind of a spirituality. So if you want to get locked up, oppose the political system of the country or oppose the religious teaching of the institution. And you're sure to get either inquisited, killed, burned at the stake, or at best locked up. So this was Jesus' experience. Now, I think that anybody who's serious about their spirituality, if you really start digging deeply and you really want to become, you want to move toward enlightenment, at some stage, you're going to doubt your own sanity. Because what you're espousing at this stage and the ideas you're contemplating and the relationship you have with God and the visionary experiences or the way you're dreaming or whatever is radically different from the way you were brought up. And at some stage, if you go deeply enough, you'll begin to doubt your own sanity. Sometimes before other people begin to accuse you of being crazy, you're going to actually doubt your own sanity. Because everything you thought was up is down, and everything you thought was down was up. And this is really, really frightening. And at this stage, a lot of people back off and they join fundamentalist sects. Because in a fundamentalist sects, you don't have to ask any more questions. They've asked the questions for you and have the answers for you. And so the essence of fundamentalism is that they take an extraordinarily complex phenomenon like life or the spiritual journey and they reduce it down to a few fundamentals, and there'll always be an infallible leader that you got to listen to and follow, and they will identify an enemy, and they'll be the bad guy, and it's okay to kill even those bad guys. And then there's tremendous safety, because now you're not going to go mad anymore. Now you're not going to even have to think anymore. Somebody's going to tell you what to wear, what to dress, how to think, who the enemy is, and now there's tremendous safety here. And you get this in every religion at some stage. You have a modern version of it in ISIS. You had versions of it in Christianity. When they were in a position to enforce their will, they led crusades and inquisitions. And now that they're not in a position to impose that, you still have fundamentalist sects that think everybody else is damned. I had two parents in visiting me a few weeks ago with a 23-year-old son who's joined a very, very fundamentalist sect of Roman Catholicism. A group that believes that all of the popes since John the 23rd are actually imposters, that they're not real popes, that we've left the real Catholic Church, and that it is a sin to worship in any church except the Latin Tridentine Rite that goes back to that the last real pope was Pius XII, and everything since him has been corrupted. It's called sede vacante, that the seat is empty, that the seat of Peter is empty. And this kid, is totally convinced, I had a conversation with him, that it was totally justified that millions of people got killed in the Crusades to defend Christianity, and that it's totally permissible to kill people who do not believe in Jesus Christ. And I'm trying to point out, what's the difference between you and ISIS? I have the truth. How do you know I have the truth? Because the church tells me. So how do you work with somebody like that? So obviously there's so much fear and insecurity in this kid that he needed, some group to believe in who was totally infallible and that made him feel secure. So if we're serious about our spiritual life, we're either going to be accused of being crazy or we're going to fear for our own sanity at some stage. And it's a necessary stage to go through. It's like we have to pull the rug out under ourselves. Our life has to pull it out from underneath us. And so we have to really question all the old certitudes that made us feel special and important and different and saved or enlightened or whatever word we want to use it, until we come to the realization that all of us are equally beloved children of God and that all the paths up the mountain are equally valid. They all get us to the summit eventually.